hey, Israel, Netanyahu, we are lions. Yeah, right. You are liars. But we are the ones funding you, arming you, paying for all of this. That's the United States. And this is weird to me because we say, yes, to defend our ally. No. We're doing their foreign policy, which makes no sense, which doesn't lead to any peace, which leads to basically a war zone across the Middle East. Somalia basically doesn't exist as a country. Libya, it doesn't exist. It's a battlefield. It's a war zone. So that's 6 out of 6. And Netanyahu's crowing, now we go on to Iran. The United States broke apart Sudan. Why? Well, Sudan was an enemy of Israel, so we have to break apart Sudan. So we supported the South Sudanese. Now we have the real trifecta, massive civil war in Sudan and massive civil war in South Sudan. In other words, we broke apart the country, and now there's civil war in both halves of the country. Obama ordered the CIA to overthrow Assad. So that started in 2011.
But why would Obama want to overthrow Assad?
Because Israel has run American foreign policy in the Middle East for 30 years. That's how it works. We have an Israel lobby. We have this clean break strategy. We have a plan for 7 wars in 5 years. And what's interesting is they actually kind of carry out this madness. They don't explain any of it to the American people. They don't tell anybody, but you can watch step by step. We've had 6 of those 7 wars. The only one that hasn't happened is Iran. And if you watch every day now, the MSM, the mainstream media, is pushing for U.S. war with Iran. Netanyahu's pushing for war with Iran. They're really trying to get this started to make 7 out of 7.
I'm actually very excited to watch this interview today. So Tucker Carlson had Jeffrey Sachs on his channel a few days ago, and this interview is going absolutely viral. And Tucker Carlson is one of the biggest, if not the biggest figure in American conservative politics. So the fact that he's going a little bit anti-Israel and America first is a very big deal. So this was like a 2-hour interview. I condensed it into like 25, 30 minutes. I really hope you enjoy that. And if you do appreciate that, make sure you press the like button and subscribe to my channel. Now let's continue.
But Obama, for no particular reason, by the way, but he launched 2 of these wars on the list of 7. He launched the war to bring down the Libyan government, Muammar Gaddafi, in the fall of, the war started in March 2011. And he and Hillary Clinton, his Secretary of State, said Assad must go in the spring of 2011. I remember scratching my head at the time saying, oh, that's interesting. How are they going to do that? When we come back to Obama, he started the war with Syria in 2011. I can remember actually vividly the call that Assad must go. And I did scratch my head. I think it was on Morning Joe when it was said, and I was asked by Joe Scarborough, what do you think? And I said, well, that's pretty odd. How's he going to do that? Turned out it was going to be 13 years of mass war, 300,000 dead, and destroying a country. That's what it turned out to be. But Obama signed an order called Operation Timber Sycamore. People should look it up. You can find it online, but you can't find it in the mainstream media because it's not discussed. But it was a so-called presidential finding that the CIA should work with Turkey, with Saudi Arabia, with others to overthrow the government of Syria. So that was the plan. We went to war, we had the different forces in Syria, we had the regional, but it was blocked by one. Who was it blocked by? It was blocked by the United States government. Why? Well, because their condition was that Assad must go on the first day of the agreement rather than a political process. Everyone else agreed on a political process, but the United States said, no, this is regime change. Assad must go on the first day. And that was not possible. So that was the end of the attempt at peace. So we should understand this was an American operation. I believe it's still rolled out.
But why doesn't someone at the New York Times just ask the obvious question, which is, why am I supposed to hate Assad exactly? Why is it somehow a test of my loyalty to the United States what I think of Bashar al-Assad? Like, who cares? Like, what? That's such a core question. I've never heard anyone ask that. I meant to ask you, why did Russia stand aside as Assad fell?
I think that it was first of all, a military choice because Russia is in the midst of a very tough war along a 1,200 kilometer front in Ukraine, and it did not want to divert any major military effort in that direction. Second, the proximate reason why Assad fell was that the main military backing of Assad was Hezbollah forces and the Iranian Guard, and they had both been, especially Hezbollah, had been very badly mauled by Israel in the last month and a half, and had pulled its reinforcements from Syria to reinforce Lebanese positions.
So for those that don't know who Jeffrey Sachs is, he's actually a professor at an Ivy League school at Columbia University. He's an American economist. He's a public policy expert. He's a big name. So when he's critical of Israel, it says a lot. And I'm so happy everyone's eyes are opening up in America. Finally, it'll take time, but I think the Huck always wins. In the end, everyone will know what the truth is.
What happens next in Syria?
Well, there'll be continued war, and now the drumbeat is for war with Iran. Anything is possible. Netanyahu dearly wants the U.S. to go in and bomb Iran. Probably some of President Trump's advisors will feel the same. The incoming administration is a mix of old school hardliners and people with a very different perspective. So there will be an internal battle for the heart and soul of the new administration, but it doesn't lead to any answers. And there's no way to, quote, defeat Iran. Even if we went in and bombed Iran, Iran has strong allies. Iran has Russia and China as allies. Iran is part of the BRICS. Iran has a military relationship with Russia. Then there are groups that say, we don't really have any fundamental conflict with Russia, and Russia's no real threat to us, but China's the real threat. So we should end the war in Ukraine, something I completely agree with. Why do we need a war with China? And so there are people who say, hey, why don't we make business, advance technology, actually have some attention to our economic needs, not go bankrupt in the process? And that group is also part of the Trump incoming team. And this is probably the most consequential question that a country could face, is which of these different voices will prevail in this new administration. Israel has driven so many American wars, and we say, absolutely, yes, that's our greatest ally. These have been at huge cost to the United States, cost of trillions of dollars, cost geopolitically, but somehow we gave away our foreign policy to Israel years and years ago, and it's been absolutely devastating. Well, it's obvious in what we're seeing every day. Territorial integrity, yeah. Israel's just invaded from the southwest into deeper Syria, Turkey from the north. Russia has its area, the United States and the Kurds have their area. This place is just going to be a battlefield for years to come.
Now, keep in mind that Israel has this whole list of 7 countries that they wanted to go in war with back in the 90s or something, right? Or early 2000s, 20 years ago. And the US has gone into war with every single country except for Iran. And it seems like Israel is really pushing us to go into war with Iran now. They said they already took over Syria, like parts of it. They had Golan Heights, which was considered Syria. Now they said they need a buffer for the Golan Heights, so they're taking over more parts of Syria. And then everyone else is taking over their parts of Syria, like he just mentioned. You got Russia, America, Kurds, all of that. It's a big mess. It's a big mess. And most of these wars are because of, guess who?
Iraq. We know what happened with Iraq. Trillions of dollars, a complete destabilization of the country. Netanyahu wants to control all of Palestine, wants to rule over the Palestinian people, does not want a Palestinian state, and that has led to militant opposition. That's led to Hamas, that's led to Hezbollah, that's led to other groups. Netanyahu's theory is, well, we're never going to allow a Palestinian state, so we have to bring down any government that supports those militant groups against us, because our core aim is greater Israel. That's not much of a worthy cause, by the way. Having a Palestinian state next door and having peace could have saved probably 1 million lives by now over the last 30 years.
So the Nile to the Euphrates would include what?
Well, if you take the if you take the greater view of this, it would include Lebanon, it would include Syria, it would include part of Iraq, it would include part of Egypt, and some of these people actually quote the Bible and say we're going to do this, and it's a little sad and absolutely terribly frightening. But I'd say the more narrow vision is what they call from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. That's taken as a pro-Palestinian chant, but it's exactly the opposite. It is the greater Israel literal vision of the government of Israel.
Yeah, I have to stop here because I wanted to just mention, and I'm going to continue the video in a second. It's just, you often hear a lot of very pro-Israel Zionists say, oh, look at all of these, they call it pro-Palestinians, Hamas supporters, saying, oh, river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and they just don't want Israel to exist. That's how they take it. When in reality, they are, and their government officials are the ones that have this vision of making Israel from the river to the sea. The irony, the hypocrisy is just insane.
It's the literal idea. Probably well over 100,000 have been killed in the most recent war by Israel. Official count 45,000 of bodies claimed from the rubble, but we know that there are a lot more that have died since this war in Gaza began. But all of this is to say, this greater Israel idea says we can't make peace with the Palestinians, so anyone that supports the Palestinians is, by definition, a mortal threat to us. And when you have a mortal threat, you must destroy it. And so this is the opposite of diplomacy. It's war. And as Netanyahu crowed last week, it's war to remake the Middle East. Not only throughout the Middle East and the drumbeat for war with Iran, it's not only Biden authorizing the use of long-distance strikes into Russia, which, as President Putin has accurately said and has not been denied by the United States, are actually U.S. strikes on Russia. But this is incredible. How would we feel if Russia were attacking the United States? would we say,
and trying to kill the president, which
Yes.
we are trying to kill Putin right now.
would we say that's just fine? Don't worry if Americans are getting a little upset about that. But that's literally what Biden has approved. Under the Constitution, Biden is president till January 20th. I think it's right to say that Biden should not put America into further insecurity. He's done enough damage. And so I think it's right for every political figure to say to Biden, you're at the end of your term, and the world is very dangerous. You do not have a mandate to increase the danger. You should never have authorized the use of ATACMS and other U.S. missiles in deep strikes into Russia. Stop further provocations now. Experts that look at this think we're closer to nuclear war than we have ever been. And I refer often to the doomsday clock of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which is the graphic to demonstrate how close or how far we are from nuclear war. And that doomsday clock puts the clock at 90 seconds to midnight, which is the closest to nuclear Armageddon that it has ever been since the clock was first rolled out in 1947. So I think it behooves those people who are making the decisions in the Biden administration to stop imperiling Americans at this point and to understand that their job right now is to keep things stable, to give power over to President Trump on January 20th, 2025.
I think my guess is that one of the reasons so many documents from 9/11 are still classified 23 years later, it's hard to imagine why, is because they tell a more detailed story about why al-Qaeda struck the United States. And it seems clear it was a response to, and I'm not defending it, of course, obviously, but it was still cause and effect. And the cause was American foreign policy, was a response to that. A, do you think that's true? And B, if it is true, then how afraid should we be about future terror?
It's just so crazy seeing Tucker Carlson, who was honestly very racist 20 years ago, especially after 9/11. I remember when it happened. And now seeing him saying that, maybe they're not declassifying these documents because of our foreign policy. It's amazing that he's finally on board. It's so much later, but at least it's happening.
Sachs, given what we've been doing.
It may be the most important thing that President Trump could do would be to open up the historical record so that we understand what has really happened, because we are 90 seconds to midnight. We are closer to nuclear war than ever. We have a military machine in the service of the Israel lobby, or in the service of the military contractors, or in the service of the deep state on its own, or for whatever other crazy idea. And we just don't have democratic deliberation or accountability about this.
And Tucker Carlson also said that it was because of our foreign policy. I just want to really get more specific there. He actually meant Israel. That was a foreign policy.
But we could, if we did, we would change the direction of this. And we know that the U.S. government lied up the wazoo on all of the question of the origin of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that made the pandemic, and has lied until today. We know that the intelligence agencies know a lot that they haven't said. So this is another area. Could we actually have some honesty? Could we actually have some transparency? Could we actually look at something where a pandemic took perhaps 20 million lives worldwide? Where'd that come from? Especially since the evidence is now overwhelming that it was a laboratory creation with U.S. scientists and U.S. funding playing a huge role in this. If our goal is primacy and we pursue that like this octogenarian who can barely function anymore says we should, we'll all get blown up. We'll move from 90 seconds to midnight to 60 seconds to midnight to 30 seconds to midnight and goodbye. Because we can't have a world where the United States says we're in charge of everything. If you aim that way, we will end up with World War III that will not go well.
Well,
since 1991, Netanyahu's been with American military remaking the Middle East. It's been a disaster on both fronts. It's made America drastically less secure. But they continue, this group, in power. And there's a chance that President Trump could change this. This is the most promising single reality of his government if he chooses rightly. He has to understand he's got a completely divided team and he's got a completely divided landscape in Washington. And I think he knows the deep state is not going out with a whimper. It's going to fight for its prerogatives. Questions. But the most important question facing us is a country that potentially is more secure than any country in the history of the world going to do itself in by a self-provoked World War III. And we're on that course. And 5 presidents have been on that course through their incompetence and their obedience to an unaccountable deep state. And President Trump is coming in saying that he's going to change direction. He says every day that he wants to be president of peace. By the way, I think the greatest thing that could happen is 4 Nobel Peace Prizes for President Trump. He could end the war in Ukraine. And the fact that Biden just proved the point by saying, yeah, we'll fire the missiles into Russia, make it all the more clear why they're concerned about this. This isn't an idle threat. This isn't some dumb thing. They're being hit right now by U.S. missile systems, was an initial statement. NATO will not enlarge for at least X years. Somebody said 10 years. Somebody said 20 years. This is also completely ridiculous. Then another idea. Well, we'll give Russia this territory, Donetsk and Lugansk and maybe Kherson and Zaporizhia and Crimea, but all the rest of Ukraine will be part of NATO. Of course not. It's the same deal. This is ridiculous turmoil right now. It's very interesting, Tucker, that Zbigniew Brzezinski spelled this out to the letter in 1997. And it's fascinating to read his account. All wrong. He got it completely wrong, but he spelled it out. And what he said was in his book, The Grand Chessboard in 1997, we should expand NATO eastward. We should expand Europe eastward. And we should ask the question, what will Russia do? There was
And he basically predicted that Russia won't do anything. And obviously, as we see now, Russia is going to invade and Ukraine, and they didn't just put their hands on their lap and just stay quiet. They actually are trying to take over.
I don't remember the exact name, but something around 1998 called the Chechnya Friendship Committee. Chechnya, okay. Burning issue for the United States? I dare 1 in a million of your listeners to know exactly where Chechnya is in its history, because who knows, who cares? But if you look at the Chechnya Friendship Committee, it was the blue ribbon committee of American neocons. Big Brzezinski right there. Everyone that wants the hard line. Why? They couldn't care for 1 iota of a moment about Chechnya. Of course not. They wanted to break up Russia. Everything is antagonism to break up Russia. So they fund
Islamic extremism.
So they funded the jihadists everywhere. Exactly. And by the way,
the same move over and over and over again.
It's not even, we made Al-Qaeda. I think everyone understands this. We made Osama bin Laden. We made this, the overthrow in Syria where they're saying, oh my God, it's HTS. What do you think? This was what Obama tasked in 2011-12. Jihadists.
So what would happen if they succeeded in killing Putin? I mean, I don't understand why that would be in America's interest to have 6,000 nuclear warheads unsecured floating around in a country that's 20% Muslim and very complicated. And that seems like the last thing that you would ever want to do. When he's the most pro-Western leader in Russia.
Yeah, let me address it in a little bit different way. In the last year, the leaders of Hamas wanted to make peace with Israel, and their political negotiator was a man named Hania. What did Israel do when the peace feelers came out? They assassinated him to make sure that there would be no attempt by Hamas to make peace. State, which is, you're not aiming for peace. You're aiming for primacy. You're aiming for dominance. You're aiming to remake the region in your image. You're resisting any call for compromise. Yitzhak Rabin, when he wanted to make peace, he was assassinated. Killed the peacemakers. But what we know is that this is state action. We know this in the United States. Kill the peacemakers. We know it of Mossad, rise and kill. And they've done it repeatedly in front of our eyes. So it's not the harshest enemy you try to kill. It's the one that threatens you not with war, but with diplomacy. That's what they dislike. They don't want peace. They want primacy. This is really a different thing. Where is it getting us? Since the whole thing is completely delusional, it's getting us closer and closer to nuclear annihilation. How could anyone think you'd kill the president of a nuclear superpower? Of course, it's the most mind-boggling, wrong-headed idea. I have no information about that. What I do have information about is the ones that they actually kill. We can watch Kissinger in 1994 explaining, yeah, if Russia's weak, take advantage of them. This is the time to take advantage of them. This is what gets us into such unbelievable insecurity. We could be the safest people in the world in history. No one could conceivably attack us. And yet we're 90 seconds to midnight.
Do you have any expectation that will change?
I'm counting on President Trump to change this. I think his instinct is right. I think his sense is right. I think he doesn't like war. I really do. You know, he
doesn't.
He displayed that in the first term, and he said that repeatedly now. This is the best thing we have going for us. Now, in his first term, he hired a lot of very irresponsible people that like war, or that like duplicity, or that like the deep state, or that like unaccountability, like John Bolton, one of my least favorites among all of these.
Fair.
And Trump hired them. So the question now is probably not his deep sense, which I think is absolutely right, but now his tactical sense inside the U.S. government. Please don't let the deep state continue on a path that it's been on, and don't let the normal hardliners, because Washington is filled with people who have been on the payroll of the military-industrial complex their whole careers. Don't let them dominate policy.
I'm going to continue this video in just a second. I just wanted to remind you that if you enjoy content like this, where I condense a 2-hour interview into a 25-30-minute video so that you don't have to go watch the whole podcast, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really does help out a lot. And if you really want to support independent channels like this, because you know a lot of this content does get demonetized, please consider becoming a member. It's only $2.99. And if you do that, I'd really appreciate it. Now let's continue with the video.
arguably basically 80 years since the end of World War II on a particular jag, which at least Mitch McConnell does us the service of naming by its name, which is primacy. And if we continue on that course, Trump will fail and the United States will be gravely endangered. And if he reverses that course, he stands to be a great and historic president.
You know, a war with Iran feels inevitable. I'm obviously opposed to it, but tell us how you think that would go if it happens.
There's nothing inevitable till it happens.
Amen.
So
thank you.
This is extremely important. A war with Iran will be World War III. So that's the point. Iran is not alone, and it will not remain alone. And so if we go to war with Iran, we are expanding the war with Russia. With Russia, we are at a possibility of peace, but we're also at a possibility of nuclear war. They're both very close. And if we go to war with Iran, we make the war, nuclear war, all the more likely.